A 6-year-old girl trembled next to a newspaper stand, her knees scraped and her eyes sunken as a millionaire drove by in his luxury car. "Mister, my dad beats me with a belt every day," she said in a weak voice. He froze. What happened next would forever change both of their destinies. Subscribe to the channel for heartwarming stories every day. The sound of Italian loafers echoed through the marble floor of the penthouse as the millionaire adjusted the platinum watch on his wrist. Through the panoramic window, the city looked like a chessboard where he moved all the pieces. At 52, he commanded a hotel empire that spanned 3 continents. But the numbers in his bank account contrasted with the emptiness in his chest. His breakfast remained untouched. Imported fruits and artisanal breads that held no flavor for him. The butler left the newspaper on the table, highlighting the headlines about his latest acquisition, a resort on the Mediterranean coast. Business. Victories no longer filled the chasm he carried since that night 7 years ago, when a misjudgment cost the life of the only person he truly loved. Meanwhile, 10 blocks away, in a tiny apartment with peeling wallpaper, the girl cowered under the bed. Her small body trembled with the echo of shouts and the sound of glass breaking in the living room. Her father had come home drunk again. "Get out of there, you useless thing! Who's going to clean up this mess?" The guttural voice made her heart race. Her fingers clutched the tattered teddy bear, the only gift from her mother before she disappeared 2 years ago. The purple marks on her back still ached from the beating the night before. She rubbed her swollen eyes from crying and stared at the window. Outside, the sun rose over a city that ignored her existence. At school, no one asked about her bruises. The teacher had tried to interfere once, but her father had convinced everyone with his fake smile and stories of household accidents. Who would believe a 6-year-old against an adult? That morning, while the millionaire signed documents worth millions, the girl made the bravest decision of her short life. She waited for her father to fall into an alcoholic sleep, grabbed her teddy bear, a faded photo of her mother, and walked out the front door without looking back. The city seemed enormous to her small steps. She walked for hours, guided only by a memory, the face of that rich man on television, talking about children in need. She had seen him once on the only channel the old TV got. He smiled differently from the other adults. It seemed genuine. The sun was already high when she arrived at the newspaper stand. Her scraped knees bled, her torn dress stained with dirt. It was then that she saw the shiny black car parked across the street, and she recognized, even from a distance, that face. Destiny had a plan that neither of them could imagine. The driver opened the car door as the millionaire finished a crucial call. Another contract signed, a few more million for accounts he barely kept track of. His personal assistant read aloud the day's agenda: meetings, lunch with investors, a charity cocktail party he sponsored but couldn't stand to attend. "Cancel the cocktail party. Tell them I'm unavailable," he ordered, with the usual coldness that made subordinates tremble. That's when he felt it. Something tugging at the sleeve of his bespoke Italian suit. He looked down, annoyed by the interruption, ready to brush away any beggar with a nod to security. But he found those eyes, deep, dark, laden with a pain that didn't belong to childhood. A look he knew well, the same one he saw every morning in the mirror. "Mister, my dad beats me with a belt every day," the girl said in an almost inaudible voice, so low that he had to lean in to hear. Something strange happened inside him, as if an internal mirror shattered into 1,000 pieces. He, who had built emotional walls so high that not even his few friends could climb them, felt a crack open in his chest. The personal assistant stepped forward, pushing the child away. "Sir, we have a meeting in 20 minutes with the shareholders. I'll call security to handle this." But the millionaire raised his hand in a gesture that silenced the assistant instantly. Cancel everything. My schedule is clear for the rest of the day." He crouched down to the girl's eye level. He saw the bruises partially hidden by the dirty sleeve of her dress, noticed how she flinched at the slightest movement. He recognized the signs, the same ones his late daughter showed after the accident when he visited her in the hospital, consumed by guilt. "What's your name?" he asked, surprising himself with the softness in his voice. "I can't say," she replied, looking over her shoulder as if danger lurked. "He'll find me if I do." He nodded, respecting her fear. "How did you find me?" "I saw you on TV, talking about helping kids," she replied, clutching the teddy bear against her chest. "I walked a long way. I hoped it was true." The millionaire felt as if he had been punched. That interview had been years ago, before the tragedy that turned him into the cold man he was now, before abandoning all social causes, convinced that he had no right to talk about protecting children when he had failed to protect his own daughter. Without thinking, he extended his hand. The girl hesitated, like a wild animal assessing whether she could trust. Then, with trembling fingers, she touched his palm. "Are you hungry?" he asked. She nodded timidly. "Let's get something to eat. Then you can tell me more about your father." As he stood up, he noticed the curious glances of passers-by. His face was too well known to go unnoticed. A ragged child holding hands with one of the richest men in the country would certainly draw attention. "Sir," the assistant whispered nervously, "I don't think it's prudent." "Prudence is no longer an option," he cut him off sharply. "Call my legal team. Tell them I need them urgently." As he walked with the girl towards a nearby cafe, he felt something strange in his chest, like a rusty gear that was spinning again after years of being stopped. The millionaire didn't know it, but this chance encounter was no accident. It was the first step on a journey that would unearth secrets he never imagined. The gourmet coffee cooled untouched as the millionaire watched the girl devour the sandwich as if she hadn't eaten in days. In fact, maybe she hadn't. They were in a private room in the cafe, a place he frequented rarely, but where his privacy was respected handsomely. "I should have ordered something lighter for her," the waitress commented with genuine concern. "Kids who don't eat regularly can get sick from food that's too heavy all at once." He nodded, annoyed at himself for not having thought of that. How many things about taking care of a child had he forgotten, or worse, never learned? His phone vibrated incessantly. The legal assistant had sent 10 consecutive messages alerting him to the legal risks of taking a child off the streets without involving the authorities. Kidnapping was the word she used. The irony wasn't lost on him. He, who followed every law to the letter in his business, was now potentially committing a crime. "I need to call the cops," he said finally, more to himself than to the girl. The sandwich fell from her small hands. Her eyes widened in pure terror. "No, please, no, he'll find me. He's friends with cops. It's true." The desperation in her voice was so genuine that the millionaire felt a chill. He knew this reality well, people in positions of power protecting each other. "Mister, I promise I won't be any trouble," she pleaded, tears streaming down her dirty face. "I can clean your house. I know how to cook eggs. I don't make noise, I swear." Her words hit him like an avalanche, a 6-year-old offering domestic services in exchange for protection. What had the world done to her? The cell phone vibrated again. It was his criminal lawyer. "If you don't involve the authorities now, you're committing a crime. This could destroy everything you've built." It was true. A scandal of this size could cause his company's stock to plummet. Years of work, generations of wealth, all compromised by an impulse. "I have a fortune. I can hire the best lawyers in the country to protect you," he tried to explain to the girl. "Money doesn't matter when they protect each other," she replied, with a wisdom too cruel for her age. "My teacher tried to help. He smiled, said I fell down the stairs. Everyone believed him. They always believe him. The millionaire closed his eyes. The girl was right. How many cases like hers had he seen in the news over the years? How many children returned to abusive homes for lack of evidence? How many times had the system failed? The cell phone rang. It was his executive assistant. "Sir, there's a press conference in 2 hours about the merger with the Asian hotels. The shareholders are worried about the rumors of your absence." He looked at the girl, who was now tracing invisible figures on the table with her finger, humming softly to herself, a lullaby that his daughter used to sing too. "Cancel the press conference. Sir, the stock has already dropped 3 points since this morning. Your presence is critical to cancel everything." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "For how long, sir?" It was a fair question. For how long would he be willing to compromise his empire for a child he barely knew? The answer came easier than he expected. For as long as it takes, he hung up the phone and made a decision. He wouldn't involve the broken system immediately, but he couldn't just hide the girl either. He needed a plan. Allies who wouldn't betray him. "Do you trust me?" he asked the girl, surprising himself. She looked up, studying him with that premature maturity. "You have sad eyes like mine," she replied simply. "I think so." He took a deep breath and picked up another phone, a personal number he hadn't used in years. "I need help," he said when someone answered. "It's about a child." The voice on the other end, an old friend who was a family court judge, was silent for a moment. "Are you dealing with guilt, or do you really need help?" The question hit him like a punch. Was that what everyone thought of him? That any act of kindness would only be a way to atone for his past sins? "There's a girl being beaten," he replied firmly. "If I follow the normal protocols, she'll go back to hell. I need a legal path that truly protects her. Come to my office. Through the back entrance, nothing official yet, and be discreet." As he hung up, he realized that the girl was watching him with an uncomfortable intensity, as if she could see through the layers of protection he had built over the years. "You lost someone too, didn't you?" The question caught him off guard. He felt the familiar lump in his throat, the one that arose whenever he thought of his daughter. "Yes," was all he could say. "Me too," she replied, extending the tattered teddy bear, "but she said she'd wait for me in the stars." At that moment, the millionaire felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time. It wasn't just compassion or guilt, it was a connection that transcended reason, as if an invisible thread united them through their shared pains. As he paid the bill and prepared to take her to meet the judge, he knew he was crossing a line of no return. And for the first time in years, he didn't care about the consequences. The judge's office smelled of old books and strong coffee. The girl clung to the millionaire's coat, looking suspiciously at the strangers who were talking in code about her future. Words like temporary custody, restraining order, and psychosocial evaluation floated around the room like frightening birds. "She needs an immediate medical examination," insisted the judge, a 60-year-old woman with piercing eyes that seemed to see through lies. "We need to document the abuse before the bruises disappear." The millionaire nodded, but felt the girl stiffen beside him. "No hospitals," she whispered, terrified. "He'll find me there." "No one will find you," he assured her, although he didn't know if he could keep that promise. "I have private doctors. No official record." The judge frowned, disapproving of the circumvention of protocol, but agreed with a sigh. 24 hours, that's what I can give you before I formalize the case. Use that time to gather evidence. After that, we'll have to involve Child Protective Services." As they left through the back of the courthouse, the millionaire noticed a black car parked across the street. How long had they been watched? He pulled the girl closer, instinctively. The medical examination was performed in the private wing of a clinic. The pediatrician, An old acquaintance who had cared for his daughter meticulously documented every mark, every scar on the small body. The millionaire waited in the waiting room, feeling a growing anger with each passing minute. "It's years of abuse," the doctor informed him as she came out, handing him a sealed envelope. "Some old fractures that weren't treated properly, moderate malnutrition, and—" She hesitated, lowering her voice. "There are signs of extreme neglect." He clenched his fist so tightly that his nails left marks in his palms. How could someone do this to a child, his own daughter? The thought hit him by surprise. Where had that idea come from? He barely knew the girl. Back in the penthouse, now a strange environment even for him, the millionaire watched the child cautiously exploring the space. She touched the objects as if they were made of soap bubbles, about to burst. When the butler served dinner, she sat up straight, with her hands on her lap, waiting for permission to eat. "You can eat as much as you want," he encouraged, realizing how small gestures of normalcy seemed like alien concepts to her. Hesitantly, she picked up her fork, but her eyes remained watchful, as if expecting a trap. Throughout the meal, she saved pieces of bread in the pocket of the new dress that the assistant had bought in a hurry. "You don't need to hide food," he said gently. "There's more in the kitchen." She froze, ashamed to be caught. "Sorry," she mumbled. "It's just that sometimes he forgot to buy food for days." That night, preparing the girl for bed was a challenge the millionaire hadn't expected. She didn't know what a bubble bath was. The concept of a room just for her seemed frightening. When the housekeeper tried to help her get ready for the bath, she cowered against the wall. "Only Mister," she insisted, looking at the millionaire with pleading eyes. He dismissed the employee, embarrassed. He hadn't bathed a child since his daughter, and even then, he had rarely done it personally. There was always a nanny, a housekeeper, someone hired for the daily tasks while he built his empire. Now, here he was, helping a girl into the bathtub, checking the water temperature, trying not to look too much at the marks on her body as she played timidly with the foam. "My mom used to say that bubbles are stars that fall into the water," she commented, blowing foam from her hands. "Your mom seemed to know beautiful things," he replied, feeling a lump in his throat. "She did, before she got sick. After that, she just looked at the ceiling and cried." The simplicity with which he described the tragedy was devastating. As he helped her dress in new pajamas, 3 sizes too big as there hadn't been time to buy the right size, the millionaire realized how long it had been since he allowed himself to feel anything other than guilt and anger. As he tucked her into the huge bed that swallowed her like an ocean, she grabbed his hand. "Do you have nightmares too?" The question caught him off guard. "Yes," he admitted, surprised by his own honesty. "I do. Me too. Every night. Can I tell you a secret so they don't come back?" He nodded, curious. "You have to squeeze the hand of someone you like hard. Like this," she demonstrated, squeezing his fingers with her small hand. "Then the monsters get scared and go away." The millionaire swallowed hard, feeling something break inside him. Without thinking, he sat on the edge of the bed and began to tell a story. The same one he told his daughter years ago, about stars that became guardians of children during the night. At some point, he realized that the girl had fallen asleep, still holding his hand. Carefully, so as not to wake her, he tried to get up, but she squeezed his fingers in her sleep. Resigned, he leaned back against the headboard. "Just a few minutes," he promised himself. "Just until she sleeps deeply." When the butler came to check on them hours later, he found them both asleep. The girl curled up like a little bird, and the powerful tycoon sitting next to her with his head bowed and the most serene expression anyone had seen on his face in the past 7 years. On the bedside table, the cell phone vibrated incessantly with notifications, the stocks plummeting, meetings cancelled, and the first alert from a tabloid. Billionaire spotted with mysterious child. Who is she? The world he knew began to crumble, while a new, frightening and strangely comforting one took shape around him. The sun had barely risen when the phone rang. It was the judge with a tense voice. He reported her missing. He's on TV right now. A desperate father pleading for his kidnapped daughter. The police are already involved. The millionaire felt his blood run cold. He turned on the television in the room with the volume low so as not to wake the girl who was sleeping curled up in the sheets. On the screen, an ordinary-looking man with eyes red from forced tears begged for the return of his little princess. Whoever took her, please give my daughter back, he sobbed to the cameras. She needs daily medication. She has a special condition. The staging was perfect. In the background, police officers seemed moved, while reporters held microphones eager for every word of the desperate father. He's lying, whispered a small voice behind him. The millionaire turned around, startled. The girl was standing, clutching her teddy bear, staring at the screen. I don't take any medicine, and he never called me little princess. There was a firmness in her voice that contrasted with her fragile body, a determination born in suffering. Am I going to have to give you back? The question hung in the air like a threat. She looked at him with those eyes that carried too much age for her small body. If you give me back, he'll kill me, she replied simply, without drama, just stating a fact. He said he would if I told. The phone rang again. The legal assistant, in a panic. The police are on their way to your penthouse with a search warrant. Apparently, someone in the cafe recognized you yesterday and took pictures. They're in all the tabloids. The millionaire made an instant decision. He called his private pilot. Prepare the jet. Take off in 1 hour. Where to, sir? Good question. Where to run with a child who wasn't legally his? Any departure from the country would be intercepted. Any property in his name would be searched. That's when he remembered the only place that no one would associate with him, the old country house where he had spent his last days with his daughter before the accident. A property registered in the name of a shell corporation, known only to his deceased accountant. To the lake house, he instructed, and no flight record. In 20 minutes, they were in the car with tinted windows, driving through the back of the building while police cars arrived at the main entrance. The girl, now properly dressed in clothes of her size bought in a hurry, watched the city pass by the window with a worried face. I'm causing you trouble, she murmured, more a statement than a question. No, he replied firmly. You're saving me. The words escaped before he could contain them, and surprisingly they were true. This child had pulled him from a 7-year stupor. For the first time since his daughter's death, he felt something besides emptiness. At the private airport, they transferred quickly to the jet. Only the pilot and a stewardess he trusted implicitly accompanied them. As they flew over the city, the millionaire checked the news on his tablet. The headlines were merciless. Tycoon kidnaps, child, midlife crisis, or something darker. Hotel empire crumbles as CEO flees with minor. Former employees reveal he always had strange behavior around children. The last one made him nauseous. How could they invent something so vile? But he knew how it worked. He himself, years ago, had hired public relations firms to destroy the reputations of competitors. The world he created was now turning against him. The girl, oblivious to the headlines, had fallen asleep in the leather seat, exhausted by the emotional roller coaster of the last few days. The plane landed on a private airstrip near the lake house. The place was exactly as he had left it 7 years before. His daughter's toys still in the garden, covered in leaves and dust. The pain of the memory hit him like a train. I'm pretty here, commented the girl, looking in wonder at the lake reflecting the sunset. It seems magical. It was my daughter's favorite place, he replied, surprised again by his own honesty. What happened to her? The simple question opened a wound that had never really healed. I lost her in a car accident. I was driving. The girl looked at him with an understanding that no adult had ever shown, without judgment, without false pity, just acceptance. Do you dream about her too? My mom appears in my dreams. Every day, he admitted. As they opened the house and brushed away the cobwebs, something strange happened. The pain was still there, but now it had company, a new feeling of possibility, of continuation, as if a door that had been locked for years had been opened, letting in a little light. Night was falling when the special phone, the one only 3 people in the world had the number for, rang. It was the judge. The DNA test you requested before disappearing is ready, she said without preamble. Do you have any idea of the mess you've created? The result, he insisted, feeling his heart race. A long sigh on the other end. Positive, 99.99% confirmation. She's your biological daughter. The world stopped spinning for a moment. On the porch, the girl was playing with dry leaves, making small, organized piles. His daughter. His own daughter. How was it possible? The social worker found records about the girl's mother, continued the judge. Apparently, you had a brief relationship 7 years ago, before your marriage. She never told you about the pregnancy, and she passed away 2 years ago from advanced cancer. The pieces began to fall into place. 7 years ago, before he met his wife, he had had a brief affair with a waitress at a hotel he acquired. They broke up when he got married 3 months later. He never imagined. What happens now? He asked, still stunned by the revelation. Now you have a much stronger case. Confirmed paternity changes everything, but you'll still have to face charges for not following legal procedures. And the alleged father, well, he's claiming rights for raising her since she was a baby. The girl approached, curious about the call. The millionaire looked at her, really looked. How hadn't he noticed before? The eyes were the same as his, the shape of the chin, even the way she furrowed her brow when she was focused. I need to go to court, he decided. I'm not running anymore. That would be prudent, agreed the judge. I have a preliminary hearing scheduled for Monday. As her legitimate daughter, you have strong parental rights, but the process won't be easy. He has already mobilized public opinion in his favor. As he hung up, he realized that the girl was watching him with a disturbing intensity. Why are you looking at me like that? He asked gently. Did the lady on the phone say something about me? The millionaire hesitated. How to explain to a 6-year-old that, in fact, he was her biological father? A father who had never known of her existence, who hadn't been there when she needed him most. Yes, he replied cautiously. We found out something very important about you, about us. The girl waited, patient as only someone who has suffered knows how to be. It seems I met your mother a long time ago, before you were born. She frowned, processing the information. Were you her friend? Yes, a special friend, and deep. It seems that I'm your father. The words hung in the air like autumn leaves, slowly, in spiral, until they landed between them. The girl showed no surprise or shock. She just considered the information with that disconcerting maturity. Is that why I dreamed about you before I met you? The question caught him off guard. You dreamed about me? She nodded, hugging the teddy bear. Mom showed me your picture once. She said you were an important man. Then she cried a lot and put the picture away. But I dreamed that you were coming to get me, many times. The millionaire felt his knees weaken. He sat on the dusty sofa, trying to absorb the impact of those words, all those years. While he drowned his guilt in work and isolation, his biological daughter suffered abuse at the hands of a monster, a child he didn't even know existed. "Why didn't your mother ever tell me about you?" he asked, more to himself than to her. "She said you had another family, that it was better that way." Another stab of guilt. He really had another family at the time. He was newly married, about to have a daughter with his wife. How would he have reacted if he had known of this girl's existence? "We're going to court on Monday," he explained gently. "We're going to tell the truth to the judge, that I'm your real father, that man hurt you." Her gaze darkened. "Is he going to be there?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Probably, but he won't be able to touch you, never again. He says he has friends everywhere, that no one would believe me." The millionaire took her small hands in his. "I believe you, and I'm going to use all the power I have to protect you." During the weekend, while they prepared for the battle to come, something extraordinary happened between them. Small moments of normalcy, assembling a dusty puzzle found on a shelf, teaching her how to make paper airplanes, listening to her sing songs that her mother had taught her. With each hour, he discovered more pieces of the puzzle that was his daughter. On Sunday night, as they finished a simple dinner, he had prepared himself, surprising himself with skills he didn't even know he possessed. The girl asked the question he dreaded. "If you win in court, am I going to live with you forever?" The millionaire felt the weight of responsibility fall on his shoulders. Until then, he had been focused only on saving her, on winning the case. He hadn't thought about the aftermath. His life was dedicated to business. He lived on planes, in hotels, in meetings. What kind of father would he be? If we win, he corrected himself, we're going to build a life together. It's going to be different for both of us. We'll have to learn. Are you going to have to go to work like the other dad? Yes, but in a different way, and I will never, ever hurt you. She considered that for a moment, then nodded as if closing a deal. Can I get a dog? I've always wanted one. For the first time in years, the millionaire smiled genuinely. I think we can negotiate that. On Monday, dressed in their best clothes, they drove to the courthouse through the back, as instructed by the judge. The media already surrounded the building like vultures, thirsty for images of the child kidnapper. In the courthouse hallway, they met the judge and the social worker assigned to the case. Both of their faces were grave. He brought 3 lawyers and mobilized the press, warned the judge. He's painting a picture of a dedicated father against an eccentric billionaire. I have the truth and DNA tests, replied the millionaire. Sometimes the truth isn't enough in the courts, sighed the social worker, a middle-aged woman with eyes tired from seeing too much. And what about the girl? Is she prepared to face him? Everyone looked at the child, who was holding the millionaire's hand tightly. The contrast between the small being in a blue dress and the imposing man in an impeccable suit was moving. I'm ready, she declared with surprising firmness. I'm not afraid of him anymore. When the doors opened and they entered the courtroom, the millionaire felt the world slow down. On one side, a battery of flashes, reporters whispering, lawyers in expensive suits. On the other, sitting with a rehearsed expression of suffering, the man who had tormented his daughter for years. Their eyes met for a second. In the alleged father's gaze, beyond the false sadness for the cameras, there was something else, a flash of recognition followed by pure hatred. At that moment, the millionaire knew. That man knew exactly who he was. He knew about the connection with the girl's mother. Maybe he always knew. The hearing began with the legal formalities. The judge, a different man from the friend judge, seemed inclined to favor the foster father, casting distrustful glances at the millionaire. The story of the biological DNA was received with skepticism. Too convenient, murmured the man's lead lawyer. tests fabricated to justify a kidnapping. That's when the girl, who had been watching everything in silence, suddenly stood up. "Can I talk, please?" The judge blinked, surprised by the interruption. "This is not the appropriate time for—" "Please," she interrupted with firm politeness. "I need to show something." Hesitantly, the judge nodded. The girl walked to the center of the room. With deliberate movements, she lifted the sleeves of her dress, revealing scars and bruises in different stages of healing. Then she turned around and slightly lifted the back of her dress, showing belt marks on her small back. A sepulchral silence fell over the room. "He did this," she said simply, pointing to the man who claimed to be her father. "Many times, when he drank, when he was angry, when he just wanted to." The cameras flashed frantically, capturing the moment when the truth replaced the fabricated narrative. The man's face twisted in barely contained fury. "She's lying. She's a manipulator. She always has been. Kids fall, they get hurt. There's more," continued the girl, unperturbed. "He knew who my real father was. Mom told him before she died. He said he would sell me to him one day when he needed money. He said I was his unemployment insurance. That's why he kept me alive." The shocking confession caused a commotion. In the room, reporters stood up. The judge banged the gavel, demanding order. The man's lawyers whispered frantically. In the midst of the chaos, the alleged father stood up abruptly, knocking over his chair. "You ungrateful little liar! After everything I've done for you!" He advanced towards the girl with clenched fists. The millionaire moved instantly, placing himself between her and the aggressor. "One more step, and it will be the last one you take," he warned with a lethal calm. The court security guards intervened, restraining the man who was now screaming threats and obscenities, destroying any image of a loving father he had tried to cultivate. When order was restored, the judge looked at the scene with a transformed expression. The sight of the girl, still standing with dignity despite the exposed marks, had changed everything. "This hearing is adjourned. Temporary custody is granted to the biological father, pending a full investigation into the allegations of abuse. The defendant will remain in custody until further order." As the man was taken out of the room, still shouting threats, the millionaire knelt before his daughter. "You were the bravest person I've ever seen," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "I learned from you," she replied simply. "You weren't afraid of him either." At that moment, under the fluorescent lights of a crowded courtroom, surrounded by strangers and cameras, something solidified between them. It wasn't just the scientific truth of DNA or the legal victory of custody. It was something deeper, truer, a bond that transcended blood or papers. As they left through the back of the courthouse, protected by security guards, the world outside was already receiving the first news of the dramatic turn in the case. The headlines that had previously condemned him now told another story, that of a biological father fighting to save the daughter he never knew existed. As they got into the car, the girl looked at the millionaire with a question in her eyes. The media coverage exploded in the following 48 hours. What had started as millionaire kidnaps child turned into corporate hero rescues biological daughter from abuser. Experts debated, interviews were requested, offers for books and films began to sprout like mushrooms after the rain. The millionaire ignored all of it. Holed up in a discreet hotel while his legal team finalized the details of permanent custody, he and the girl built their own reality, one moment at a time. "We need to talk about your name," he said during breakfast, watching her create designs in the maple syrup on her pancakes. She looked up, curious. "What's wrong with my name?" "None, but technically you're entitled to my last name now. And also," he hesitated, unsure how to broach the subject. "Would you like to change your first name? Start over?" The question hovered between them like a hesitant butterfly. The girl put down her fork, seriously considering the proposal. "Can I choose any name?" "Anyone." She looked out the window at the sky that was beginning to clear after days of rain. "I want the name my mum wanted to give me before he changed it." The millionaire felt a lump in his throat. There was so much about this child, his daughter, that he didn't know, so many lost years. And what was that name? She wanted to name me after her grandma, a name that means light, because I came when everything was dark in her life. He nodded, swallowing with difficulty. "It's a beautiful name. It suits you." That afternoon, the phone rang. It was his executive assistant, the first contact with his previous life in over a week. "Sir, the shareholders are restless. The stock is down 15%. The board is considering a vote of no confidence." The millionaire looked at his daughter, who was drawing intently in the hotel's small office. "What's their alternative? Oust me? I've practically been AWOL for days." "Actually, sir, the trend reversed since yesterday. After the news about the truth, your stock is up now. The public sees you as a kind of corporate hero with a social conscience. Bookings at your hotels have increased 30%. The absurdity of the situation almost made him laugh. For years he had invested millions in public relations, while his popularity dwindled. It only took a genuine act, not even planned, to transform his public image. "Schedule a conference call with the board for tomorrow. I have plans they need to hear." As he hung up, he found his daughter watching him with that piercing gaze that always seemed to see beyond the surface. "Are you going back to work?" "Yes, but in a different way, from a different place." "From here?" "Not exactly." That night, he took her for a drive. The car followed back roads, moving away from the city, until it reached an old gate, partially hidden by ivy. Beyond it, a farmhouse emerged, not the temporary mansion by the lake, but a smaller, cozier place with wide windows and a porch that embraced the entire building. "What is this place?" she asked, curious. "It's where I was born," he replied, surprising himself with the revelation. "My parents lived here until I was 12 years old. Then we moved to the city. I bought it back a few years ago, but I never had the courage to come back." "It's pretty," she commented, observing the old swing hanging from a century-old tree. "It seems like a place for stories." "It was," he agreed, feeling long-suppressed memories emerge. "My mum used to tell stories every night on that porch." They walked through the abandoned garden, where wildflowers had taken over the old flower beds. The house would need renovations, but the structure remained solid. "Could we live here?" she asked suddenly. "Away from those people with cameras?" The suggestion caught him off guard. Returning to this place would mean facing so many memories. "Maybe, if that's what you want. I want a place where no one looks at me strangely, where I don't have to explain the bruises I still have." The millionaire observed the house for a long moment. The dusty windows, the porch floorboards that would need to be replaced, the immense work they would have ahead of them, and yet he felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time: enthusiasm. "We have work to do then." Returning to the hotel, they found a woman waiting in the lobby, the social worker from the case. "I have news," she announced with a grave expression, "and we need to talk in private." In the room, while the girl took a bath, the social worker opened a folder. "The investigation has advanced. We discovered things, disturbing things." The millionaire sat down, preparing himself for the worst. That man wasn't just a common abuser. He has an extensive history of fraud, moving from city to city, assuming different identities, always getting close to vulnerable women with children. How so? He stalked his victims, including the girl's mother. The millionaire frowned, confused. That doesn't make sense. Why would he choose? Because of you, interrupted the social worker, handing him a sheet. He worked for your company. 8 years ago, he was laid off during a restructuring. Apparently, he held a grudge. The revelation fell like a thunderbolt. The millionaire examined the document, an old employee ID photo. The man looked different, younger, different hair, but undeniably the same. He sought out the girl's mother on purpose? Exactly. According to the records we found, he tracked her down after finding out about your relationship. He approached her after you had moved on. Our interviews with neighbors reveal that he used to say that one day he would get rich at the expense of the arrogant boss. The millionaire felt a wave of nausea as he realized the extent of the man's revenge. Using an innocent child, his own daughter, as an instrument of retaliation. He knew from the beginning, that's why the abuse. He punished her for being my daughter. The social worker nodded grimly. There's more. We found a flash drive in his apartment. It had a detailed plan. Eventually, he intended to reveal everything to the press, how the tycoon had abandoned his illegitimate daughter to poverty. It was extortion in gestation. The millionaire closed his eyes, feeling the weight of guilt for something he didn't even know had happened. Years of suffering that his daughter had endured due to a connection with him she didn't even know about. He purposefully got close to her, to my ex. Everything indicates yes, it was a long-term revenge plan. At that moment, the bathroom door opened. The girl appeared, with wet hair and clean pajamas. Her gaze went from one adult to the other, catching the tension in the air. "He found me, didn't he?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. "Is he coming to get me?" "No," replied the millionaire, firmly, kneeling to be at her level. "He's in jail and he's going to stay that way for a long time. But we found out something difficult." The social worker gently intervened. "Honey, remember when we talked about always telling the truth, even when it's hard?" The girl nodded, clutching the teddy bear tighter. "We found out that man, he got close to your mother on purpose because he was angry at your real dad." The child's eyes widened with understanding, a comprehension far beyond her years. "That's why he got angrier when I did things that reminded him of him," she said, pointing to the millionaire. "He said I was arrogant just like—" She stopped, realizing the full connection for the first time. "He hurt me because I'm your daughter. To hurt you too?" The millionaire felt his heart break at the innocent question that revealed such a monstrous truth. He pulled her into a tight hug, as if he could retroactively protect her from all the harm she had suffered. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. So much." The social worker left them alone after a few minutes, promising to return the next day with the final custody documents. Alone in the room, father and daughter sat on the small porch, watching the city lights. "It's not your fault," said the girl finally, with a wisdom that left him speechless. "You didn't know." "I should have known," he replied, his voice choked. "I should have looked for your mother after we separated, ask if she was okay. Mom used to say that some people only meet for a short time in life, but that doesn't mean the time wasn't important." He looked at her in amazement. How could a child who had lived through so much trauma maintain such purity of spirit? "Your mother was a wise woman. She said, 'I had your eyes,'" commented the girl, looking at him curiously. "That when she looked at me, she saw you." The millionaire felt tears that he had repressed for years finally overflow. Without shame, he let them fall as he hugged his daughter, this unexpected miracle that had found its way back to him through a labyrinth of pain and chance. That night, lying in separate beds but holding hands between them, a new ritual they started to ward off nightmares. He made a silent promise. The revelation of the revenge plan would not be the end of the story. It would only be the beginning of something much bigger, a redemption he never imagined possible. 3 months passed like a fever dream. The farmhouse had been renovated, transformed into a home with colors chosen by the girl. Soft yellows on the living room walls, a sky blue in her bedroom, shades of green in the kitchen that now always smelled of something baking. The swing on the century-old tree had been restored, and two more added, so that both could swing side by side. And they weren't alone. A Labrador puppy, rescued from a local shelter, ran across the newly planted lawns, barking cheerfully at squirrels and butterflies. The girl had named him Star, even though he was a male, because, according to her, he lights up everything around him. The millionaire had learned to work remotely, limiting his trips to the absolute minimum. He had transformed one of the rooms into an office with state-of-the-art screens and equipment, but with an inviolable rule. After 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the door closed and the father replaced the businessman. The girl had begun to attend a local school where no one knew her story or her famous last name. She was just the new student, the bright-eyed girl who drew stories instead of writing them, because she was still learning the letters that no one had bothered to teach her before. Little by little, the physical bruises disappeared. The emotional scars would take longer, but weekly therapy helped. The child therapist was amazed by the child's resilience, her ability to love and trust despite everything. "I've never seen such a rapid recovery case," she commented in one of the joint sessions. "She blossoms daily." The millionaire knew that the credit was not his. It was all the inner strength of that little warrior who, somehow, had kept her luminous essence intact even in the darkness. That Saturday morning, they were planning a picnic. The millionaire prepared sandwiches, a domestic skill he discovered he possessed to his own surprise, while the girl arranged the basket with carefully folded napkins. The phone rang. It was his executive assistant, his voice tense. "Sir, I'm sorry to interrupt your weekend, but it's an emergency. The Asian merger is falling apart. Chinese investors are threatening to withdraw. We need your personal presence in Hong Kong tomorrow." The millionaire felt his stomach sink. Since the revelation of his paternity, he had managed the empire from a distance, delegating what he could, participating in meetings via video. It had worked for a while, but the gears of global business eventually required a physical presence. How long? 3 days, minimum, possibly a week. A multi-billion-dollar contract is at stake, thousands of jobs. He hung up, feeling the weight of responsibility. It wasn't just his wealth at risk, but the livelihood of employees on 3 continents, people with families, with children. The girl watched him from the kitchen door, her face suddenly somber. "You're leaving," she said. It wasn't a question. "Just for a few days," he tried to explain. "It's something important, something I can't solve from afar." She nodded with that mature understanding that always surprised him. But her small shoulders drooped, and something in her eyes changed, a glimmer diminishing like a light dimming. "Okay, I understand." But she didn't understand. How could she? For a child who had been abandoned so many times, any departure carried the ghost of all previous separations. "I'll be back as soon as possible," he promised, kneeling to face her. "And I'll call every day, several times." She forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Who's going to stay with me?" It was a practical question, but it hid another much deeper. "Who's going to protect me?" "Aunt Elena," he replied, referring to the housekeeper he had hired, a middle-aged woman, gentle but firm, who had won the girl's trust in recent months. "And Star, of course." She nodded again, already distancing herself emotionally, building the walls she had learned to erect to protect herself from the pain. The picnic happened, but the joy had evaporated. They ate in silence in the shade of an oak tree, while the dog ran in circles around them, unaware of the tension. That night, as he put her to bed, he tried to explain once more, "There are people who depend on me, not just the 2 of us, thousands of them." Like the people in Charlie's factory? He blinked, confused. Charlie. From the movie we watched. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. When the factory closes, all those people lose their jobs. The millionaire smiled at the comparison. Something like that. If I don't go, many people could lose their jobs. Then you have to go, she concluded simply. It's the right thing to do. Again, her maturity left him speechless. He leaned down to kiss her forehead, but she turned away, hugging the teddy bear. Good night, she murmured, her eyes already closed, feigning a sleep that clearly wouldn't come so easily. The next morning, the farewell was brief and painful. The girl remained stoic, her chin lifted in determination not to cry, as the millionaire got into the car that would take him to the airport. I'll be back before you know it, he promised, holding her one last time. I know, she replied, her small voice betraying her insecurity. I'll take care of Star. As the car disappeared around the bend in the road, the housekeeper tried to distract her with the promise of homemade cookies. But the girl just sat on the swing, motionless, looking. At the horizon where the vehicle had disappeared, the first 24 hours were bearable. Video calls 3 times a day. The millionaire showed her the hotel in Hong Kong, the city lights, told her about the strange food, and made faces that made her laugh. She showed him the drawing she had made at school, how Star had learned to shake hands. But on the 3rd day, the complications began. The negotiations dragged on. Meetings took place in the early hours of the morning due to the time difference. The calls became shorter, rushed. One of them had to be cancelled due to an emergency. That's when the nightmare started again. The housekeeper heard the screams at night. She ran to the girl's room, finding her huddled against the headboard of the bed, eyes open, but seeing nothing beyond the terrors in her mind. He's coming back. He's going to take me. During the day, she spent hours looking out the window. She drew dark figures on papers that she later tore up. She refused to go to school. The dog whined beside her, sensing the change in her behavior. On Thursday, the inevitable happened. The housekeeper called the millionaire during a critical meeting. Sir, I'm sorry to interrupt, but she's in crisis. She hasn't eaten since yesterday. She doesn't talk. She just sits there looking at the door. The dog won't leave her side, barking at shadows. The millionaire felt his heart clench. On the other side of the world, on the 47th floor of a glass and steel skyscraper, discussing 9-figure numbers, the reality of his new life hit him with full force. Put her on the phone. She doesn't want to talk, sir. I tried. She says, you're not coming back, that everyone lies. The trauma of abandonment had resurfaced with all its force. The defense mechanisms she had built over years of abuse were back. The distrust, the fear, the certainty that any happiness would be temporary. I'll be home tomorrow, he decided, ignoring the shocked looks of the executives around the table. No matter what happens with the deal. His executive assistant pulled him out of the room. Sir, with all due respect, we're hours away from closing the biggest deal in the company's history. If you leave now, my daughter needs me. Your daughter has someone with her. This company has 10,000 employees who depend on this. Un contract. The millionaire felt the weight of the dilemma crush his shoulders. The old him, the man he was before the girl came into his life, wouldn't hesitate. The business would always come first, but now, charter a private jet. I need to be home in 18 hours, no matter the cost. What about the contract? Finalize it without me. Offer whatever concessions are necessary. That could cost billions. My daughter is priceless. The assistant blinked, clearly shocked by the transformation of the man before him. Where was the ruthless executive who would sacrifice anything for the financial outcome? Understood. Sir, during the endless flight, the millionaire relived every moment he had failed as a father, not only with this daughter he had just found, but with the one he had lost. How could he have been so blind, so obsessed with achievements that now, seemed empty. When he finally arrived at the farmhouse, the sun was rising. The housekeeper greeted him with deep, dark circles under her eyes. "She's been up all night. She's in her room." Opening the door, he found the girl sitting on the floor, surrounded by torn drawings. The dog lying protectively beside her. "You came back," she said in a hoarse voice, as if she didn't believe what she saw. "I will always come back to you," he replied, kneeling beside her. She hesitated, studying his face as if looking for signs of a lie. "But what about your important work? The people from the factory?" "I found a solution, something I should have realized from the beginning." He picked her up in his arms, frightened by how much weight she had lost in just a few days, and sat in the rocking chair by the window. "Before you, I thought the most important thing in the world was to build something big, something that would last beyond me. I believed that would compensate for everything I lost." She listened, her eyes fixed on him, as if absorbing every word. "But you taught me something different, that building a life is more important than building an empire." "You're not going away anymore?" she asked, her voice small and hopeful. "Not like that. Not for so long. And when I need to travel, you're coming with me." It took months for her to really believe it. Trust, once broken, is like a crystal vase. It can be repaired, but the cracks will always remain visible under certain light. That morning, while she finally slept exhausted in his arms, the millionaire made a call that would change everything. "I need you to implement Plan Phoenix," he instructed his chief operating officer, immediately. Plan Phoenix was a radical restructuring that he had been secretly designing since reuniting with his daughter. It involved completely decentralizing his operations, implementing remote work for senior management, and, most radical of all, transferring 30% of his shares to a foundation dedicated to children who are victims of abuse. The corporate world called it madness. Analysts predicted the fall of the empire. Nervous investors sold shares en masse. And then something unexpected happened. The shares stabilized. Then they started to rise. The new image of the company, humanized by the story of its founder, attracted a new generation of consumers. The foundation generated positive publicity that no marketing campaign could buy. In 6 months, the value of the company had risen 22%. The millionaire managed everything from his office in the farmhouse, traveling only when absolutely necessary, always with his daughter by his side. "You saved my company," he commented one afternoon as he watched her play with Star in the now flowering garden. "How?" she asked, confused. "By teaching me that there's a different way to be strong." Their first anniversary together was approaching. Almost a year since that fateful encounter at the newspaper stand. The girl, now 7 years old, blossomed every day. The grades at school improved. The nightmares, although still present occasionally, lost strength. The millionaire planned a special surprise, the inauguration of a shelter for child abuse victims built on the land where the newspaper stand had been, bought at a premium. The place where it all began would now be a starting point for other children. Everything was going according to plan until an unexpected call from the judge who had helped them in the beginning. "He's applying for parole," she announced without preamble. "And he has an influential lawyer claiming there were irregularities in the process. They're questioning the DNA tests, suggesting manipulation." The millionaire felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. How was this possible? The man had been convicted of child abuse, fraud, forgery. The evidence was irrefutable. How? "Money," sighed the judge. "Apparently he made some connections in prison. People interested in extorting you. How much do they want?" "It's not that simple. They want a public spectacle. They want you to admit you manipulated evidence, that it was all nothing more than a public relations stunt to save your image. If you do that, they guarantee the case will be closed quietly. And if I refuse, They promise a long, dirty legal battle. Even if they can't get him released, which is unlikely given the evidence, they can drag your daughter back into a court, testimonies, psychological evaluations, all the exposure we tried to avoid. The millionaire closed his eyes, feeling the fury rise in his chest. When he opened them, an icy calm had replaced the anger. Schedule a visit to the prison. I want to talk to him in person. That's extremely ill-advised, warned the judge. It was also extremely ill-advised to bring an unknown child into my house that day, he replied with determination, and it was the best decision I've ever made in my life. 2 days later, he sat in the cold visiting room of the state penitentiary. On the other side of the glass, the man who had tormented his daughter entered escorted by guards. He looked older, thinner, but the hatred in his eyes remained intact. I knew you'd come, he said with a crooked smile. The powerful always negotiate. When cornered, the millionaire observed him in silence for a few moments. This was the man who had beaten an innocent child for years, who had meticulously planned revenge using a girl as an instrument, who now threatened to drag the same child back into trauma. I didn't come to negotiate, he said finally, his voice perfectly controlled. I came to make a promise. The man's smile faltered slightly. If you or your associates try in any way to drag my daughter back into a courtroom, if a single reporter shows up at our door, if a single detail of this case leaks to the press, I will dedicate every penny of my fortune, every resource at my disposal, every favor that I'm owed, to a single goal, ensuring that you never see the light of day again. The prisoner laughed, but there was a tremor in his voice. Empty threats. The system doesn't work that way. I rewrote the rules of the global market in 6 months. Do you really think I can't rewrite the rules of this little game? He leaned forward, his voice now almost a whisper. I've already investigated your new friends. I know exactly who's behind this extortion attempt, and they've already received a very clear message of what will happen if they continue. The millionaire got up to leave, but stopped at the door. Oh, and one more thing. That foundation for abused children I created, I just tripled its budget. It now includes a legal department dedicated to ensuring that no convicted abuser receives parole in this state. Ever. He left the prison with firm steps, feeling strangely light. He hadn't used empty threats. Every word was true. But more. Importantly, he realized that the fear that had previously dominated him, the fear of losing his daughter again, had been replaced by an unwavering certainty. Nothing and no one would separate them. On the way back home, he decided not to tell the girl about the incident. There was no reason to reopen wounds healing so well. Instead, he focused on the surprise he was planning for their anniversary. When he arrived, he found her in the garden, trying to teach Star to fetch a ball, an impossible task, since the dog preferred to roll on it rather than bring it back. He doesn't understand the concept, she explained seriously, making the millionaire smile. Some of us take longer to learn certain lessons, he replied, thinking of himself. That night, sitting on the porch watching the sunset, she asked a question that caught him off guard. Why did that man hate me so much? The question hung in the air like a storm cloud. The millionaire considered several answers. White lies, half-truths, evasions. But something in her honest and direct expression demanded honesty in return. He didn't hate you, he replied finally. He hated me. You were just a way to get to me. Why? Because I hurt him a long time ago. Not personally, but with my decisions. When companies grow, sometimes people lose their jobs. He was one of them. The girl considered this seriously, swaying slightly on the porch swing. So he hurt me. For revenge? Yes, and that's perhaps the most cowardly thing someone can do, hurt a child to get to an adult. Would you do that? Hurt someone to get revenge, two souls that fate had brought together through pain, but who together discovered something beyond survival, a greater purpose, a deep connection, and the simple but revolutionary truth that love, when offered without reservation, has the power to heal even the deepest wounds. And somewhere above them, among the stars that now dotted the night sky, maybe a little girl named Laura smiled, knowing that her father had finally found his way back home. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to receive new stories every day. What would you do in the Millionaire's place? Comment below and share this story with someone special. The innocent question carried a huge philosophical weight. The millionaire realized that years ago he might have done exactly that, not physically, but by ruining the reputations of competitors, by crushing people who stood in his way. "I used to be a different person," he admitted. "I'm not proud of some of the things I did, but now I know that revenge only creates more pain. It's a circle we need to break." She nodded, absorbing the lesson with that premature wisdom that always impressed him. "I think he was also hurt when he was little," she said suddenly. "Nobody is born like that, right?" The depth of her empathy, being able to consider the broken humanity of her own tormentor, left the millionaire speechless. How many adults would be capable of such understanding? "You're extraordinary," he said finally, his voice choked. "Did you know that?" She shrugged, evidently uncomfortable with the compliment. "I just don't want to be like him, full of anger." "You never will be," he guaranteed. "You have something he never had." "What?" "Love, the real healing power." As the night fell around them, the millionaire realized that he was learning more from that 7-year-old than in decades in the business world. Lessons that no elite, university or executive course could teach. The next morning, without warning, a retinue arrived at the property. Architects, engineers, landscapers. The girl watched curiously from the window as they measured the adjacent land, which the millionaire had secretly purchased months before. "What's happening?" she asked. "A surprise for our anniversary?" he replied with a mysterious smile. "Something we're building together, even without you knowing." During the following weeks, the land turned into a hive of activity. Tractors leveled the ground, foundations were dug, structures began to emerge. The girl drew guesses of what it would be, from a private roller coaster, her most extravagant dream, to a princess castle, although she admitted she wasn't so little for that anymore. The millionaire maintained the mystery, making sure that tarps covered strategic parts of the construction, visible from their property. The anticipation became part of the fun. The day before the anniversary, while finalizing the preparations, he received another call from the judge. "It's over," she announced with evident relief. "The petition has been withdrawn. The friends have disappeared. Apparently your message was well understood." "I didn't use intimidation," he clarified. "No, you used intelligence," she agreed. "We've heard rumors that certain politicians with shady connections had investigations coincidentally reopened, and that large donations arrived at anti-corruption departments. Coincidences happen," he replied with a half smile. "Well, be that as it may, he'll be where he is for a long time, and your daughter is safe." After hanging up, the millionaire allowed himself a moment of pure satisfaction. Not for revenge, as he had explained to his daughter, that path only generated more suffering, but for the certainty of justice. For the first time in his life, he had used his power and influence not to accumulate more wealth, but to protect something truly important. On the morning of the big day, he woke the girl up with heart-shaped pancakes, another newly discovered skill, and a small gift, a silver star pendant, which matched the dog's name and the story they told each other about guardian stars. "This is just the beginning," he promised as she admired the jewel. "The real gift comes later." After breakfast, he blindfolded her and led her along the path that connected their property to the construction site. Star ran around them, barking, in excitement, as if he understood the importance of the moment. "Ready?" he asked, positioning her in the perfect spot for the reveal. "Yes!" she exclaimed, practically jumping with excitement. When he took off the blindfold, the girl was momentarily breathless. Before them stood not just any building, but an entire complex. A colorful campus with several interconnected buildings, gardens, playgrounds, and a huge sign that read, "North Star Institute, a shelter and recovery center for children." Is it a place for kids like me?" she asked, her voice small with awe. "Yes, for children who need protection, care, a fresh start, children who need someone to believe in them." She walked slowly along the main path, observing everything with wide eyes. The therapy rooms with glass walls facing serene gardens, the cozy dormitories decorated in cheerful tones, the specialized medical center, the school with art and music studios. "And most importantly," continued the millionaire, pointing to an administrative building, "this will be the legal center. Lawyers working exclusively to protect these children, to ensure they don't return to situations of abuse, to change the system that failed so many of them." They stopped in front of the main entrance, where a sculpture rose, an adult and a child holding hands, looking at the stars. "You know what else?" he said, kneeling to be at her level. "Every decision about this place will be made by a board, and you'll have a seat on it, because nobody understands better than you what these children need." Her eyes widened with responsibility. "But I'm just a kid who taught me more in 1 year than I learned in my entire adult life. A kid who never lost the ability to love, even when everything conspired to turn her into someone bitter. If that's not wisdom, I don't know what is." She looked again at the complex, then at the millionaire, and then, for the first time since, they met, threw herself into his arms in a spontaneous and complete hug without reservations or hesitation. "Thank you for finding me," she whispered. "No," he corrected, holding her with all the love he never imagined being capable of feeling. "Thank you for finding me." The following months brought a routine that neither of them had ever imagined possible in their previous lives. The North Star Institute began to operate, receiving its first children, hand-picked cases, the most desperate ones, those that the overwhelmed system couldn't adequately serve. The girl, now almost 8 years old, took on her role on the board with surprising seriousness. Her unique sensitivity allowed her to perceive needs that adults with their predictable views often overlooked. "The windows need to be bigger," she had insisted during a planning meeting for the new wing. "When you spend too much time locked up, the first thing you want is to see the sky." The architects had exchanged glances, then redone the drawings. According to her suggestion, the result were environments that architectural critics later described as revolutionary in trauma-centered design. The millionaire divided his time between managing his empire, now with completely reimagined principles, and personally supervising the institute. The press, initially skeptical about his transformation, began to recognize the authenticity of the project. It wasn't a public relations stunt, but a genuine reinvention of purpose. That autumn morning, as they walked together through the campus, watching newly arrived children timidly explore the gardens, an unfamiliar car approached the main entrance. "Are we expecting someone?" asked the girl, instantly alert. Despite all her evolution, certain reflexes remained. The constant vigilance, the quick assessment of potential danger. "Not that I know of," replied the millionaire, also tensing slightly. From the car, an elegant middle-aged woman stepped out, accompanied by a younger man carrying files. As they approached, the millionaire recognized her immediately, although he hadn't seen her in person for almost a decade. "Diana," he greeted formally, feeling a pang of anxiety. "I wasn't expecting to see you here." The woman smiled politely, but her eyes revealed complexity. Decades of shared history, not all of it pleasant. I wanted to see this place for myself. The rumors don't do it justice. Diana was his ex-mother-in-law, the grandmother of his first daughter, the one he had lost in the accident. After the tragedy, the relationship had become toxic, laden with mutual accusations and unresolved grief. Eventually, they had completely broken off contact. "This must be her," said Diana, looking at the girl who was partially hiding behind her father. "Your new daughter." The way she emphasized "new" contained a painful subtext that didn't go unnoticed. "Yes," he replied firmly, placing his hand protectively on his daughter's shoulder. "This is my daughter." An uncomfortable silence fell over them, laden with unresolved past. "Can we talk in private?" asked Diana, indicating the lawyer next to her. "We have important matters to discuss." The millionaire hesitated, looking at the girl. "You can go," she said with surprising maturity. "I'll help the counselor with the new kids. That little boy still hasn't talked to anyone." He watched her walk towards a group of newly arrived children, where a boy of approximately 5 years sat isolated, hugging his knees. With innate gentleness, she knelt beside him, offering a toy without forcing interaction. "She's extraordinary," commented Diana, following his gaze. "Yes, she is," he agreed, allowing himself a brief moment of truce. In the main office, Diana got straight to the point. "I'm here to correct a mistake from the past," she began as the lawyer opened a folder. "My mistake." Confused, the millionaire waited for her to continue. "After the accident, after we lost Laura, I was consumed by anger. I needed to blame someone, and you were the perfect target." The name of the deceased daughter, which was rarely spoken aloud, hung in the room like a restless ghost. "You know it was my fault," he replied, the familiar guilt tightening his chest. "I was driving. I was distracted by work." "It was an accident," insisted Diana, surprising him. "Accidents happen, even with careful parents. It took me years of therapy to accept that." She gestured to the lawyer, who slid a folder across the table. "These are the documents for the Laura Foundation. After her death, I created a foundation in her name, dedicated to helping children with the same rare medical condition she had." The millionaire blinked, surprised. He had never known this. "Why are you showing me this now?" "Because," she replied, taking a deep breath, "I want to merge the Laura Foundation with your North Star Institute." The proposal caught him completely off guard. "I don't understand. Why would you do that?" Diana looked out the window at the campus where broken children were beginning, slowly, to find a new path. "Because you're doing something extraordinary here, something that honors not only Laura's memory, but her spirit. She always cared about children more vulnerable than herself, even during her treatments." Her eyes glistened with contained tears as she turned back to face him. "And because it's time to forgive. Both of us, ourselves and each other." The millionaire felt something break inside him, a last barrier of self-recrimination that he had firmly kept in place, even after all the recent advances in his life. "I don't know if I deserve forgiveness," he admitted, his voice hoarse. "It's not a question of deserving," replied Diana with hard-won wisdom. "It's a question of needing it to move forward. Besides," she added, looking back at the window, "Laura would have loved to have a sister like her." The mention of the two daughters as sisters, something that had never occurred to the millionaire to articulate that way, brought a wave of emotion that he wasn't prepared to face. "There's another reason for my visit," continued Diana, after giving him a moment to compose himself. "Something you need to know. 2 years had passed since that first encounter at the newspaper stand. The North Star Institute, now merged with the Laura Foundation, had become an international reference in the treatment of childhood trauma. The model developed there, which combined medical care, psychological support, legal protection, and adapted education was being replicated in 3 different states. The millionaire, who no longer defined himself primarily by his wealth, divided his time between managing the institute and his companies, now restructured with humanist values at their core. The social responsibility program he had implemented had become a case study in business schools, but none of that mattered as much as the small daily victories he witnessed at home and at the institute. His daughter learning to ride a bike, a traumatized boy speaking for the first time after months of silence, Star finally learning to fetch the ball, to the delight of his owner. That morning, as they walked together through the now flowering campus, the girl, almost a preteen, asked a question that she had been formulating for some time. How do we know we're doing enough? The millionaire considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. How do you mean? There are so many children suffering, she explained, gesturing to the institute around them. We help some, but what about all the others? How do we know if we're really changing things? It was a question he himself had asked countless times over the past few years. The enormity of the problem sometimes seemed overwhelming, even with all his resources. Do you know the story of the starfish thrower? He asked. She shook her head, curious. It's about a man walking along a beach after a storm. Thousands of starfish had been washed ashore and were dying under the sun. The man began to pick them up one by one and throw them back into the ocean. A traveler passed by and laughed. Why bother? There are thousands. It won't make any difference at all. The man picked up another starfish, gently threw it into the water and replied, it made all the difference in the world to that one. The girl considered the story in silence as they walked. So we don't need to save them all? She asked finally. We need to try our best, he replied, and remember that every individual life matters. Even if we could only help one child, just you, it would have been worth every effort. But we're helping more, she affirmed with determination, and we're going to keep going. Yes, we are, he agreed with equal conviction. They arrived at the center of the campus, where a simple ceremony was being prepared. It was the official inauguration, Day of the New Wing, a significant expansion that would double the institute's capacity. Local authorities, donors, and the specialized press would attend. Among the special guests, Diana, now a regular presence in their lives, waited with a warm smile. After years of isolated grief, she and the millionaire had rebuilt a relationship, based not only on the shared memory of Laura, but on the commitment to the future of the children they now helped. Nervous about the speech? She teased as they approached. A little, he admitted. I've never been good with words. Liar, interjected his daughter with a smile. You just need to speak from the heart, like you always tell me. The 3 laughed, sharing a moment of levity that would have been unthinkable years ago, when they were all trapped in different forms of pain and isolation. As the ceremony began, the millionaire surveyed the assembled crowd, a peculiar mix of Wall Street executives in expensive suits, dedicated social workers, rescued children, and their new adoptive or reunified biological families. Worlds that rarely collided, now united by a common purpose. He approached the microphone, feeling a nervousness that no multi-billion-dollar deal had ever provoked. His daughter gave him a discreet thumbs up from the front row. 3 years ago, he began, I believed myself to be a successful man. I had built an empire, amassed more wealth than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, and I thought that defined success. He paused, looking out at the sea of attentive faces. Then, on an ordinary morning, a little girl tugged at the sleeve of my suit and said 7 words that changed everything. Uncle, my dad beats me with a belt every day. A respectful silence fell over the audience. At that moment, I didn't know she was my biological daughter. I didn't know about the revenge plot behind her suffering. I didn't know I was embarking on a journey that would completely transform my definition of value, purpose, and success. His eyes met hers in the audience, now bright, confident, so different from the frightened eyes of that first encounter. What I've discovered over these years is that our greatest challenges often reveal themselves to be our greatest gifts. That the children we consider victims carry a strength and resilience that humbles us, and that true success isn't measured by bank accounts, but by the lives we touch. He gestured to the new building behind him. This institute is not just a place of healing for traumatized children. It's a constant reminder that we all deserve second chances, that our past doesn't have to define our future, that the greatest strength isn't in never falling, but in getting back up every time we do. As he continued his speech, he noticed something extraordinary happening among the audience, a palpable energy, a sense of shared purpose that transcended social classes, backgrounds, personal histories. The same energy he had felt that first morning when he had decided against all practical advice to stand by a stranger child. As he concluded, he invited his daughter to join him on stage. She walked confidently, no longer the frightened girl, in tattered clothes, but a young woman with purpose and dignity beyond her years. Together, they cut the ribbon that symbolically opened the new wing. Later, when the crowd had dispersed and only the staff remained finalizing details, father and daughter sat in the central garden of the campus, a serene space designed for meditation and healing. "You know what I was thinking today?" she asked, watching the setting sun paint the sky orange and pink. "What?" "That maybe everything happens for a reason, not the bad things themselves. I don't think they needed to happen. But what comes after, how we respond, how we transform pain into something different." He nodded, noting how her wisdom continued to deepen with each season. "I think you're right. If none of that had happened," she continued thoughtfully, "maybe we would never have met. And all these kids here," she gestured to the buildings around them, "maybe they would never have this place." "That's a profound perspective," he replied, marveling at her ability to find meaning even in the most difficult experiences. "Doesn't mean it was easy," she added quickly, "or that I don't have bad days. I still have nightmares sometimes." "I know, me too. But now, when I wake up scared, I remember that I'm not alone, that I have you and Star and Aunt Diana and all the people at the Institute, a family we chose." The millionaire felt the familiar tightness in his chest, that mixture of gratitude and awe that had become so familiar in recent years. "You changed my life," he said simply. She smiled, that luminous smile that had gradually replaced the frightened look of years ago. "We changed each other's lives, and now we're changing more lives together." As the sun dipped completely below, the horizon and the first stars began to appear in the twilight sky. Father and daughter remained sitting in comfortable silence.